San Francisco, in a way, is treated like the Wild West in that picture. You know, it's very extreme bad guys. You know, he's the sheriff.
The end of Dirty Harry is the end of High Noon. It's a classic, deliberately classic gesture, mimicking Gary Cooper's gesture, discarding the badge at the end of High Noon.
In a way, it's the old Western morality. The town needs the hero, but once the hero's wiped out the bad guys, the hero's either got to go or he's got to hang up his spurs, because they can't have him running around their streets shooting people.
They had a background story, of course, that he was had a very solitary existence. He didn't have a private life that he really cared much about.
Dirty Harry is God's lonely man. He's the true loner individual. He lives in a little apartment, a dirty little apartment with a couple of plaques on the wall and some, you know, beer in the icebox and a half-eaten cheeseburger. He really doesn't have any girlfriends.
Kind of guy that probably, when he dated somebody, was probably a secretary or a receptionist somewhere, or somebody he would meet along the way. I don't think he would be dating models and what have you.
Women swooned because he was so sexy, but he didn't know it. His character didn't know it, but more importantly, his character didn't care.
Hey, when the hell are you going to get a haircut?
Well, whenever you do. Look, who's got time? 3 a.m. checking the search patterns.
Well, put in for overtime.
That'll be the day.
Dirty Harry was the urban warrior who is Frankenstein. No one likes him, but they need him. He's the guy in the cage that you don't want to acknowledge needing, and they certainly don't want to go on record as having hired or encouraged, but once they open that door and let him loose, the problem gets solved. And there's just this sense of the lone vigil that he keeps over San Francisco. By himself with no support, he's just that angel of vengeance.
I think Dirty Harry moved on from Westerns, the individual taking on the group, the one guy taking on tremendous system. And that's the sort of movies Don Siegel was making.
So if I need a partner, I'll get me someone who knows what the hell he's doing.
They went to Clint Eastwood. They said, who do you want to have directed? He says, Don Siegel. He's here. I know him. He's a good friend of mine, all this kind of thing. So they had Don Siegel hired by the end of the afternoon, probably.
As Ford helped Wayne mold this persona and then shaped it, I think that John Huston was instrumental in creating Bogart's persona. And I think that Don Siegel was instrumental in establishing Clint's persona.
1919. The war is over, and there is alarming news that women's skirts are going to become shorter. Already they are 6 inches above the ankle.
Don had been a montage director at Warner Brothers in the 40s. I mean, he's responsible for the montages in Casablanca.
Paris to Marseille. Then by train or auto or foot across the rim of Africa to Casablanca in French Morocco.
Don Siegel was a legendary guy. He did The Killers with Lee Marvin.
Don was probably the best B-movie maker in the world. He could take the least amount and do the most with it. Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Very low budget, but one of the scariest movies you ever saw. I mean, he just handled it so well.
When I was a kid, you know, films like Riot and Cell Block 11 and the Body Snatchers, I mean, those were like the staples of my young movie-going life.
Clint respects Don to the utmost. He always felt that he got a lot of his style of doing things from Don.
Don Siegel didn't like any authority. He you know, studio heads, producers, he was always in an antagonistic position.
He didn't suffer fools. I mean, he knew what he wanted. But he was the most brilliant film director I've ever worked with. I learned more about film acting from him than anyone else I've ever worked with.
I love Dirty Harry because he was better than anyone at delivering those pithy lines.
Riggs was right. You guys don't have enough experience.
They didn't sound like he was trying to be tough. They sounded like he was tough.
There's that great line at the end after Hal Holbrook blows up in Magnum Force. The man's got to know his limitations, which I love.
So the man's got to know his limitations, yeah.
That's just like some Chinese philosophy kind of stuff. Just a deep kind of line.
That became one of my mantras between me and my buddies. We used to say that on the golf course all the time. You know, we used to go play golf on Saturdays and, you know, and can't get over that water with a 3-wood, you know, or something like that. And the guy would put it in the water and go, man's got to know his limitations.
Which is, for Harry Callahan, a relatively humble thing to say.
Go ahead. Make my day.
Go ahead and make my day. I mean, that's how many people wanted to say that so many times to so many people in so many places.
People sort of forget the first time they heard it because it's so oft-repeated.
And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
That's a great line. Guy's sort of reaching for a gun. He goes, go ahead, make my day.
I knew when I read that script, I knew make my day. I said, oh yeah, that's going to be the key saying of this particular film.
Go ahead, make my day.
Of course, the scene that sticks out in my mind is him with the hot dog and in the beginning of the movie, and he's got the guy on the ground and asking him if he fired 5 shots or 6.
You go to a man eating a hot dog, and he sees a robbery in progress.
Oh, shit.
And then he has to foil it on his own. There's kind of a style to it that is completely different.
That scene that became so famous